Final hour overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We'll get to our best bets later in the hour. Chris Johnston coming up here in a moment. Who starts a net for the Leafs on Wednesday night? What did he make of the Leafs road trip? It was a fun roadie. I mean, out west, we had Ray Ferraro on last hour. Ray lives in Vancouver, and he said it. Like, when the Leafs roll through town once a year, it's a different buzz.
It's noisy.
It's noisy. Sure. It's a different vibe. And you look at those Western – I mean, they're doing it all in one hit here, right? You got Winnipeg this weekend now, or
Isn't
this
it
week.
Weird that they've been out to L.A. that trip, then they come back, and then they go back out to Vancouver. Isn't it weird they're not catching Winnipeg on the way back?
Yeah, you would think that would be the appropriate move. Hit Winnipeg and play them tomorrow night or Wednesday, but they're at home on Wednesday.
Just crazy travel, man. You get into the guts of the season. It's crazy travel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're going back out to Winnipeg on Saturday after being back out on that West Coast swing, and then you go back out again, and then you're back halfway to Winnipeg. It's like that's why they call it a grind, man.
Yeah,
most teams do it like 3 times a year, which is weird. You're heading some form of east or west. Like, if you're from the east, you head out there, because you got to go out to Dallas, which is, that's a ways. That's southwest. You're heading to some of these areas where, it's a trek, time zone, all of that stuff. I know.
I mean, everyone's got to do it, Noodles, and it's no excuse, but it just seems like that would be the appropriate hit in Winnipeg on the way back. Instead, you're hitting them at home, and then you're back to Winnipeg for the home.
Well, but again, teams in the East can't complain about anything.
No,
because they're
no way.
Like, if you live in the greater New York area, you've got the easiest travel going. Like, sure, you're going to get some one hitters. Like the Oilers recently, didn't they fly to Montreal to play one game and then go home?
Yes.
I think they did, right? And like that, if you're in the West, like there's just so much travel. And the Leafs have got Winnipeg this weekend. In a month, they still have to go through Arizona and Colorado and Vegas, and they still got that trip left.
It just, the one thing, when I played in the New York area, if you're staying out, your opponent, if you're playing somebody local, like, you're in your bed, even on the road, you're in your bed by midnight that night. You play New Jersey, you play the Rangers, you go to Philly, the train or a flight back.
Hartford, those were bus
Boston.
trips. Like, we bussed to the island. We bussed to Manhattan. It was a
you
bus
could literally be on a road game. You could be in your bed by midnight that night.
Yeah.
It was that,
That's a huge advantage to have.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But so we'll see. I mean, we were talking about it last hour. What happens in net? We'll see what CJ can say about that or tell us about that. Matthews scores again last night. What's he up to? 38?
8.
Yeah, 38 on the season, and that was a beauty last night. It was a great play. Great play by Marner to set it up. And he and Marner, they're connecting, and they got Knies back up on that line. They're Keith's trying to find something, and it does feel like, Tavares, I don't believe he had a point last night. I think
No, he didn't.
Was that 7 or 8 games in a row where he's pointless? Willie's run into some bad habits again on the trip. Like, there were some pretty lazy plays by Willie. Which
bad timing on that
awful
stuff,
timing for him to start just mailing in back checks and turnovers. Like, he's got it. Like, you look at Vancouver, it's like, all right, he's dancing and he's scoring, but it's got to be the complete game. And I think when you look at Tavares right now, like, they need to rely on him because they don't have a succession plan. They don't have, like, Max Domi cannot be your second line center. Pontus Holmberg cannot be. David Kampf cannot. It probably has to be Tavares. They tried Nylander up the middle of the ice. It didn't work. They moved him to the wing, and they paid him $11.5 to be a winger. That's where he's going to play. But if Tavares is going to slow down offensively, that's going to put even more pressure on whoever's on the wing with him. And if that's Willie, it's like, you better be rocking because he's going to have to prop him up. And, I think that's become a reality here. And John's got to continue to do what he does best. You got to be a lead around the net. You got to win draws. You got to win battles in tight. I'd love to see him be a little more physical, start blocking shots, like all that kind of stuff.
Well,
you got to find a way to contribute.
The one thing I don't know how, like, when guys struggle and everyone goes through patches where they're not producing, they're not playing to their potential in certain situations, I've at least noticed Tavares. Like he's trying to dig in. You can almost see that he's squeezing his stick a little too much, like he's forcing it a little bit, where Willie, regardless, doesn't matter, plays the same way. Like, that's just, and that might frustrate people, but that might be the worst and the best thing about William Nylander is he plays the same way. And if good things happen to him, great. And he doesn't get too high. And if it's struggling for him, he doesn't get too low, where you can see other players that are struggling, they wear it. Like, I could see the stress in John Tavares' game.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
no, I agree with you. You know it. You know internally, because he has been programmed his whole life. His whole life. John Tavares has been programmed to believe the way he helps his team is to score goals. Like, that's it.
Yes.
That is what you do since he was probably 8 years old. John, get on the ice and score.
Points.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's a reprogramming that has to happen, or like an updated iOS or something. You know what I mean? It's like he needs
like
an
iOS.
Or what about updating your phone.
How do you pronounce iOS? By
iOS.
iOS. It's not an iOS.
I thought it was iOS because it's a capital zero or capital O, isn't it? I thought it was
iOS.
iOS. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. I think
it's an iOS.
It's an iOS. All right, here's CJ, Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider. You think he needs an updated iOS, John Tavares, or what, CJ?
Is that the internal operating system?
Yes, there you go. That's it. iOS.
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, it's not going well for him, but I have to believe that part of what's given John the kind of career he's had is his intensity, his focus on preparation, as he said on the weekend, that he believes confidence is something that he can will upon himself. And so, it's definitely been a tough little stretch here with the production drying up. But I don't know that he needs to be less hard on himself. I think what he's done has taken him pretty far to this point.
CJ, we had Ray Ferraro on last hour, and he mentioned the idea of assessing the team and possibly not being willing to like punt first rounders or assets for this particular year. Like, how much longer do you think the assessment period will be for the Leafs before they make a determination on what they actually think of this team and what to do moving forward?
Well, I mean, the official answer is 6 weeks, but, I would say that they have a fair bit of information that they've already collected through, 45 plus games to this point in the season. And, I think that this is actually the question for me about the Leafs, really that we're going to talk about until March 8th is how do you approach that? Because, on the one hand, you've got Austin Matthews, potentially chasing down a 70-goal season. Obviously, Nylander's had a big year as well. And, these guys aren't getting younger and all those types of things. But on the other, the Leafs just haven't really looked like they've had it. They've certainly not been as effective of a team this year as they were the previous two at minimum. Whether you're looking at underlying metrics or you're just looking at wins and losses and points and things like that. And so, when you already have a bit of a depleted cupboard, I think it's hard to believe in this group to the same degree that the specific roster you have right now, that you're only, a big trade or two away from turning the corner. But, I don't know exactly how they're going to handle that decision. I think it's probably a good thing they've got a little bit more time before really they're making those kind of calls. But, it's hard for me to see them being as big of buyers as they were last year at the deadline. I just think you haven't had enough reason to do that. And because of the actions at that deadline and a couple before it, you don't have as much to buy with. And so I think they're kind of stuck in that spot. But, I'm glad I'm not the one being paid to make the call because it's not an easy one.
What are you going to do with the goaltending this week? We had a pretty good debate as to, do you go back with Samsonov on Wednesday against Winnipeg, or do you give Martin Jones the start? And Hayes thinks it'd be telling if you give one over the other.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to go with Samsonov, just, based on the fact that, I think he at least put a little bit of a building block in place to start regaining some confidence with that game in Seattle. I thought he was pretty good, or at least good enough the weekend before against Detroit. So, I think that you give him the option to keep trying to do that. I mean, ultimately, and I don't want to be hard on Martin Jones because he's given the Leafs, more than I think any of us were probably anticipating entering the year. But, it seems to me that the clock might be striking midnight there. Just a lot of goals against in his recent stretch of starts, and certainly not being critical of him, but it just seems to me that the workload might be catching up to him or whatever it may be. And so, I think it's a good time to try to give Samsonov a little more confidence. Obviously, you got a couple days between games, and you don't play again until Saturday. Winnipeg's a tough opponent, but it seems to me like it would. The choice is sort of obvious given the way that the two guys have been trending in the very near term here.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think it'll say a lot about how they actually feel about Samsonov if he doesn't start on Wednesday. That will be very telling, but we'll find out as we get closer with Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider. What do you know about the Leafs kicking tires on Corey Perry? Did it ever happen? Was it ever close? And then I guess afterwards you can comment on the idea of him signing in Edmonton.
I don't have the sense that the Leafs were one of the main teams in there. No, I think that, they didn't look at the situation as one that was, an upgrade for them, or, maybe worried about some of the potential blowback of, things that went on, that led to his contract being terminated in Chicago. And so, I do think that certainly there were a couple other, what we might call contending teams that were there that were options for Corey, but ultimately Edmonton was pretty aggressive right from the beginning and had a clear idea of how they're going to use him. And obviously he's joining a team that's hotter than any other in the NHL right now. And so the fit was a little better for the Oilers than it was for the Leafs at this point in time.
With what you said about the potential blowback, the reaction to it, if and when Joel Quenneville becomes available, let's say today in an hour there's an email saying he's been reinstated, he's available, anyone can sign him.
Is it going to be as smooth as this, Hazy, where it's like he's just the coach and away we go?
Right. Is it just he gets right back in? And on top of that, do you think the Leafs would even be comfortable in looking into him, or would they, just say we're not going to go down that road because of his history?
It's such a big hypothetical. I mean, I was expecting Joe Quenneville to be cleared by now. I mean, it certainly seemed like that was a possibility, that the winds were maybe blowing in that direction, even as recently as the summer, and all of a sudden that's gone quiet again. And so I don't know for sure that he's ever going to be allowed to coach again. I'm not trying to make a headline out of that. I'm just saying he's in limbo right now, and the limbo's gone on a long time, and it depends on where the Leafs are at in that moment. It's just such a hard one for me to call, and it's especially hard to compare it directly to Perry because I'm being truthful when I say I still don't know exactly what happened there, what led to Perry's situation. We have a little better understanding of why Joel Quenneville is where he is based on the Jenner and Block report and what came out from the beach situation in terms of what he knew and when and what his actions were. And so I think it's going to be tough, and ultimately I do think Joel will have options. And, I can't speak for him, but the best option maybe is not to come to a place like Toronto where all that gets dragged up to a different level than if he ends up working somewhere that's a little quieter in terms of hockey media.
We noticed that Ryan Reaves was on the record this weekend saying that he's healthy and ready to play and has been for weeks. And yet he's on the IR basically because the Leafs won't take him off. This feels like it could get possibly ugly. What do you make of the comments? What do you make of Reaves and his future here in Toronto?
Well, it's not the situation you want with the player you gave a 3-year contract to in the summer. That's for sure. And Reaves is a veteran. He was through a similar situation actually as recently as last season where he had a string of scratches with the Rangers, and they ultimately found a trading partner and sent him to Minnesota where he had success and helped earn that contract. I think that the difference a year later is he's a year older and he's got a different contract attached to his name. And so, I don't know how this gets resolved. I mean, Reaves was professional in what he said. He certainly just, he didn't hide his frustration, nor, would I expect any veteran who's kind of in the circumstances he is where, he basically lost his spot in the day-to-day lineup with an injury. He feels he's been ready to play again for a while and hasn't even had a sniff of the lineup. And he might actually be the 14th forward on a given night, given the rotation they've had with, Robertson been out a fair bit of late. And so, it does feel like it probably has to come to a head at some point, but, I don't know that anything is imminent.
But what has come to a head? What does come to a head look like? Like, what does that mean?
Well, you put him on waivers, see if he gets claimed. If not, you send him to the American Hockey League. Maybe there's a trade out there for him where he can get to a team that has a spot for him to play. I mean, it's the year started so poorly for him, right? I think some of it frankly was a bit of bad luck. But what was he at one point? He'd been on the ice for I think 10 goals against in about 10 games played, and then he runs into an injury. He just has never got any traction here, and it's hard for him to have the sort of influence I think the management envisioned if he's not playing, right? I mean, you can bring in character guys or swagger guys, confidence guys, but if they're not really in the battle with their teammates to the same degree as someone who's playing basically every game, I think it's hard for him to be who he's supposed to be. And so, I can't imagine he's going to want to sit out the rest of the season, and maybe injuries or something will come along here and give him a spot back to play. But right now he's just kind of in a holding pattern, and he's not too happy about it.
CJ, where are you at with a lot of the trade chatter? Sounds like a lot of GMs have been talking and kicking tires on respective players, but maybe does the Corey Perry signing kind of get the ball rolling? And we're still waiting on Calgary's decisions. Like, what are you hearing overall, the general trade chat?
Well, certainly Calgary, I think, will kind of dictate the market to some degree just because of the number of players they have and how impactful those guys are, especially if they all end up being pieces that are traded as opposed to, say, a Hannafin getting an extension. I would think we got the next week's the All-Star break. Coming out of that, I would think that it'll be really starting to cook up a bit. I'm curious to see what happens with Sean Monahan in Montreal, just because there's been so much interest in him already in terms of teams at least kicking tires and calling to see what he might get. That he's played really well of late and he's had a healthy season, which has been really the biggest impediment for him in recent years. Is just being healthy enough to play a full year. And I do think certainly the Canadians would look at moving him maybe sooner than the March 8th trade deadline for all kinds of reasons. I mean, one, if they can get a good return right now, why wait? And two, why risk anything happening? And so, I think that there's a few things like that to keep an eye on, but reasonably, we're probably not going to get the kind of fireworks we're looking for until it gets to February.
Yeah, I saw Arbor Xhekaj has been recalled by the Habs. Xhekaj is on his way back up. He's been down in Laval.
Seeing that for that kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's been down there literally fighting in Laval. He's trying to get back up. And, because there's some rumors around him. Like, what happens with a guy like Jack? They're pretty loaded with young defense there. Do they see him as a part of the future? Nick Robertson here played great last night. Sheldon Keefe, he went over the top in a glowing, breakdown of his game. And everyone's wondering, is this a platform situation? Are they going to move on him? That's got to be a big part of the discussions, right? CJ is young players. Who do you hang on to? Who do you believe in? Do your scouts believe in them? Do the coach? Does that match up with, what the coach thinks his lineup needs to look like? All this kind of stuff factors into what these GMs are going to decide between now and the 8th.
Sure, and it also comes down to the market, right? I mean, how do other teams feel about Nick Robertson? Maybe someone out there is looking to get younger and sees a player that he's only playing, 9 minutes a game pretty much when he's in the lineup. He's been scratched 7 of the last 10, and yet he's still scored at a 20-goal pace this year when he's, based on pretty limited minutes, not a lot of power play time and those types of things. And so, I know he's small, and I know that there are some deficiencies in his game or things that might give you worry, but I think if there's another team out there that values him and thinks that, hey, we could plug him into our top 6 and give him, a spot where he can use that shot on the power play, I mean, maybe they can unlock something in him. So, I would think that it's not that the Leafs have to trade him or are definitely going to trade him, but he's certainly among the things they have. I would say that could be moved at this deadline. I talked earlier about how little they have sort of in the cupboard. I think that he's one of the pieces they really have to look at. Montreal's in a slightly different situation. You're right that they have a ton of young defensemen, but Xhekaj, fulfills sort of a specific role, very, very tough player, a great story. I think, someone that they really like, and they're not facing a tough decision with him just yet. I think that he'll be part of their team in the next season. We'll see what time holds as we go along, beyond that. But, when you're a team in the Leafs situation, you're probably balancing. Can Robertson get them something back that maybe fills a more immediate need? And, is there a real spot for him on the team, right? He's never really had much of a top 6 opportunity here with the Leafs, and he's not really a traditional bottom 6 guy just with his skill set.
CJ, some frigid temperatures have set in, and we often talk on this show about people jogging in these temps. I believe Bryan Hayes calls them heroes. I know you have a streak of 7 to 8 years of running every day. Have you ran in these frigid temperatures?
Yeah, I've been a hero every day going back 4 years. So,
Wow. Heroic.
and I know you were giving me crap last year about the treadmill. I haven't been on a treadmill in 6 or 7 months or so. So it's been all outside during the winter too.
Good for you. Yeah, good. Listen, that's a grind, man. It's crazy
why
cold.
Like,
not
what if
do
you
the
have a
treadmill?
big night?
Yeah.
Like, if you had a big night with your buddies, like beer, wings, and you're still doing it.
Oh yeah, there's no better cure for a hangover than getting a sweat on. I mean, the first step out the door is the hardest one on days like that.
That's what drives me crazy. I got a couple of buddies who are like big runners. Like we'll go to Vegas, Chicago, whatever. Like, and they go
And
for
they do
runs. Yeah, they'll get up and go for a run, and it's like, what are you doing? And
Yeah, that's tough.
like it's just
That just sounds like a
absurd.
Loser comment. What
Yeah.
are you doing?
It is. It's my two buddies. We went anyway. I'll let you go, CJ. I'll tell this. I don't want to. You're the runner guy. I don't need to continue with this story. Hey, listen. I congratulate you, man. You're grinding. It's all that matters, CJ. Keep grinding. Get out there. Pound the pavement. Do your thing. Thank you for this.
All right, guys. Thank you.
There he is, Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider.
So these guys get greased until 3 a.m, and at 8 they're pounding the pavement.
Yeah. They'll go out and go for runs. Like we went down to Vermont in the summer. We rented out that like resort. Yeah. So my buddy Flans and my buddy Kieran was coming from New York. Flans was coming from Toronto, and they met there. And they were big runners in like high school and college. And they got there and they threw on their gear and went for a run.
Before you got greased.
Yes. Like the rest of the boys are like crashing, like we're cracking beers, we're getting in the golf cart. These guys are running through Vermont.
Yeah,
like it
that's
was just,
heroic. That's
it was
heroic.
so heroic.
Like when
they
the
were
boys
getting
first
carved.
get there, it's like you gotta do like save it for the morning.
Exactly.
If you wanna be a hero.
Exactly. They're like, let's go for a run. I'm like,
Oh,
is
you're
this
a
for-
jogger too? I'm a jogger. Yeah, you want to hit the pavement?
That's where you lock the door
We
behind
should've.
them. And,
We
don't
should've.
let them back in.
We
Lock the
should-
door behind them and say, "You guys go for a run. We'll see you later tonight."
I agree.
Because that's a code red right there.
That was.
and because if you haven't seen, chances are on boys' trips, you haven't seen.
We haven't
these guys
seen them
in a
in
long
years.
time.
Exactly. Like in years. And it's like, all right, we're all jacked. We're all coming in different cars. We're all getting there within like an hour or two of each other. Guys are flying in from like London, England, coming from Ottawa, Toronto, New York, like all over the place.
And I guarantee you there's somebody at the other side of the spectrum that got greased at the airport, and you had to
Exactly.
pour him into the house when
Yes.
he first got there.
Hannibal Lecter being rolled into the house. That guy was in a completely different stratosphere.
Exactly.
TSN 1050's Leafs lineup, your chance to win Leaf tickets every week, all season long. Every weekday, we'll announce a current or former Maple Leaf player. On Fridays, you'll have a chance to call in and name the Leafs line up of the week. Name all the players in the lineup. You're going to score a pair of tickets to an upcoming Leaf game. This week, we're giving away tickets to see the Leafs play the Stars February 7th. That's a great game. Plus, we're throwing in a $250 Vanilla Visa prepaid card with each pair of tickets to make it the ultimate game night. Vanilla Visa prepaid cards are available for purchase at Petro-Canada. Today's player of the day is Jordy Ben. Jordy Ben is your player of the day. There you go. Yes. We'll get to Something to Chew On, brought to you by Boston Pizza. Recap on the NFL weekend as well. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Best Bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Seeing news that Connor Bedard is going to be out at least another 6 weeks with that broken jaw. I guess it was first week of January. He's already missed 7 games. And I guess at least another 6 weeks. What does that mean for his Calder trophy, his Calder chase?
Oh, he's
You
not
can't
winning
be
the
in that.
Calder
No.
now.
Can't be in that now.
No.
No way. Like he's
Luke
going to miss.
Hughes time. Luke Hughes time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I hear you. I think you're probably right on that.
So what will be the total time? If you add 6 weeks to now, that's another 3. Like we're looking at 9-10 weeks out. So that's over 2 months.
He would have had to
don't
gone
know.
bonkers his first couple months in the season to a point where everyone's like, he just needs to come back and play some games and he's the rookie of the year. He
Right.
didn't do that as good as he was.
Yeah, exactly. Like he'll end up missing probably close to 30 games with this, 25, 30 games. That probably takes you out of the running. Just like McDavid was the same thing. McDavid
Exactly.
had the shoulder injury. It took him out.
Right.
Something to Chew On is brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. This January at Boston Pizza, get delicious, mouth-watering pastas starting at $11.99 every single day. Enjoy the pastas you love at prices you just can't miss. Hustle into your local BP tonight. And we've been asking people online because we brought, obviously, Mahomes is not even the main story, which speaks to the heartbreak of the Bills, speaks to how much we've talked about Josh Allen, speaks to the fact that they went wide right again, right? Like Scott Norwood, and now you got Tyler Bass, wide right part 2. But asking, what does Patrick Mahomes have to do to pass Tom Brady in the all-time rankings? And a large portion of the people voting are saying win at least, 3 or 4 more Super Bowls. He's got 2 already. Obviously, Brady ended up with a lot more than that. Other options, be dominant into your 40s or at least late 30s. Maybe he already has in the eyes of some, or he never will in the eyes of others. And actually, about 22% of the votes saying he never will, which I don't believe is true at all. I would say he's got to be dominant for another decade. Like, that was the thing about Brady. And you can't hold this against Mahomes. He's 28. You can't fast forward. All he can do is play. But what made Brady amazing was he was still the best at 38, 39, 41, 42.
And I'm not saying Mahomes can't do it, but the likelihood of him doing what he's doing now for 10 more years, I honestly don't see it happening. Although Brady had some dips, man. He had some games in the playoffs where they got punted, and I was like, that's game over for that guy. He's probably going to retire. And then he played for 8 more years.
He just kept going, man.
Yeah. Right. You remember that one playoff performance he had in Denver? He was garbage, and it was like, this guy's done. Mm-hmm. And he played 8 more years after that.
Well, yeah, he did.
You know what is, though? Like, it's hard for Mahomes because I would argue longevity is going to be the key. Like, as far as your body holding up, like health. Like, that's the question. Like, I don't know. Do you see Mahomes with taking hits? He's not as big as Tom Brady. Like, is he going to play till he's 38 to 40? Like, that's the difference. Yeah. Now, they protect
Maybe
the quarterbacks
he doesn't even want to, guys.
They do
that's
now,
another factor.
Right.
Maybe he doesn't even have any desire to do that.
You're right, but they protect the quarterbacks different, which is one thing that could be a plus for him. Mm-hmm. But I look at, the health of a lot of these guys look at Ovi. We talk about Ovi all the time. Ovi wouldn't be chasing Gretzky if he wasn't a guy that played almost every night. Yeah. Like, health is a big factor in and I don't know, does Mahomes have another 10, 12 years in him to do that?
It's a great question. I mean, you look at what Joe Burrow's been going through early in his career. He's seemingly injured all the time. I worry about that with Allen. Like, again, you speak about not taking advantage of this situation. That guy runs. He takes contact.
Yeah.
Like, man, if he gets hit, who knows what happens. But, like, comparing Mahomes and Brady, again, through, the first 5.5 years of Mahomes' career, he's right there. Like, he's statistically better than what Brady was through Brady's first 5.5 years. Now, Brady won 3 Super Bowls, I think, in his first 4 years. But what Brady continuously did was just every year dominate. And every year they were in the championship game, and they were going to Super Bowls. And I think longevity is what Mahomes is ultimately going to need. And to chat about that, among other things, throughout the NFL world, we're joined now by the host of the Chasin podcast and the 33rd team contributor. Here's Trey Wingo. Trey, how do you answer the Mahomes versus Brady, or the Mahomes pursuit of Brady's GOAT status? Like, how far off is he? What does he have to do to either catch him or pass him?
Well, first of all, great to be with you guys. It depends on what you consider to be the measurement, right? Like, a lot of people will say Brady, 7 rings. That will never be duplicated. He's the GOAT. And it's hard to argue that. I personally am not a ring counter. I don't look at, to me, teams win games, teams win championships, teams win rings, teams lose games. So I look at how the player plays. It doesn't take a lot for me to understand that Dan Marino is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen in the history of the NFL, and he doesn't have a single ring. So if you're a ring counter, there's nothing that Mahomes can do except win 8. Which seems very unlikely. Mm-hmm. But if you go by how he plays the position, I would argue he's already better than Brady. It's just a matter of getting, like, if he gets 4, let's say, that would be enough for me. It wouldn't be enough for other people, but it would be enough for me.
Right.
Trey, speaking of teams, like, and you mentioned Josh Allen, who that team in Buffalo continues to lose to that team in KC. How should Buffalo take this? Is this like, oh, great game and the kicker cost them? Like, it's just got to be a real tough one to swallow for the Bills Mafia there.
Well, it is, and look, they're incredible. They've had an incredible run under Sean McDermott, right? There's no way around that. But for all of their success, they have one AFC Championship game appearance to show for it. So if you're the Pergolas, do you ask, is that enough? Is that enough? Because for a lot of teams, it would be. And I don't know. This team is really good, and a lot of things that they've done over the last few years have been amazing. But just one appearance in the AFC, the Bengals have been to 2 under Joe Burrow and went to a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And it might be as simple, guys, as they're really good, but they don't have that guy in Patrick Mahomes. And Josh is 1A or 1B at minimum. You know what I mean? Like that's the lowest he's going to be right now. But that other dude, man, like sometimes it's just hard. It's like trying to win a championship when Jordan was in his prime. Like Charles Barkley once said, I'd like to thank Jordan for having an off year so I could win the MVP. He's going to be in that conversation every year. And the only problem I have with what the Bills did yesterday is that fake punt was a disastrous decision. It was a 3-point game at that point, and they hadn't been killing you completely on offense. If Mecole Hardman doesn't fumble twice, by the way, at the goal line, we're talking about a 10-point game at that point, and it's pretty much game over. Mecole bailed out the Sean McDermott decision. That, to me, was a panic move. I didn't like that one.
Yeah, now, like I saw Rex Ryan on ESPN all day saying, go get Bill Belichick.
Well, why wouldn't you? Look, get it. He's only arguably the greatest coach of all time. So, and if I'm Bill, I don't know why he's having a second interview at Atlanta. Desmond Ridder or Josh Allen? It's a pretty simple equation for me. You know what I mean?
What a story that would be. He destroyed their souls for 20 years. He was just a crypt keeper. He'd roll in there. Yeah. They just dominated. And a lot of that was obviously Brady too. But Buffalo, they hate Belichick and everything he represents. Yet I think they would obviously, how could you not love that move? The idea of Belichick stepping in there.
I'm with you. If you have the greatest out there and he's available, do everything to get him, And I've heard people say, oh, Bills wouldn't do that because why wouldn't they? He's not doing it to you anymore. It's people change teams all the time. Mm-hmm. And if you can get the best, go get the best. I'm not saying Sean McDermott deserves to be fired, but if the ownership feels that way, if you don't think about making a serious run for Bill Belichick, I don't know what you're doing. I still don't understand why Jerry Jones is happy with Mike McCarthy. People say, well, they've won 12 games each of the last 3 years. That's wonderful. And then what? They haven't been to a conference championship game in 28 years. 28 years. The Lions were in a championship. Been in a championship game now sooner than the freaking Cowboys. So if you're Jerry Jones and you're talking Super Bowl or bust, then this isn't acceptable. There's 3 terrible playoff losses in a row for the Dallas Cowboys. And, when he says it's Super Bowl bust, I don't believe you if you're going to keep Mike McCarthy. So, if that's your position, then your position is not, we want it's Super Bowl or bust.
With Trey Wingo, are you a moral victories guy when it comes to the Packers and the Texans losing on Saturday?
I am, and I'll tell you why. The Green Bay Packers may be the first franchise that I can think of, at least in the Super Bowl era and longer, to have gotten it right 3 straight times at quarterback. You can go from Joe Montana to Steve Young, but then, Jeff Garcia's in the mix, right? You can go from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck, and then you get some other guys in there after that before you find your next guy. I think Jordan Love, since week 12, was arguably the best quarterback in football. So they found a 3rd straight franchise quarterback. They had 6 rookies catch touchdown passes this year, guys. That's never happened before in NFL history, and the Packers have the youngest roster in the NFL. I am big time up on Green Bay, and for a lot of those reasons, I'm also big time up on the Texans because what DeMeco Ryans and C.J. Stroud have done in their first year together has been absolutely remarkable.
Well, I agree with that. And the Packers had a real chance. Houston, not so much. That Baltimore team, they looked.
They're really good.
They looked really good, didn't they? Are they your favorites at this point, Trey?
They're 3.5-point favorites over the Chiefs, and the thing that I thought the Chiefs could win in Buffalo because of the injury issues at linebacker, and you saw Travis Kelce had one of the best games of his career, and they ran right at him with Pacheco. the linebackers in Baltimore are 100 times better than the linebackers in Buffalo. And if the Chiefs are going to win, Mahomes is going to have one of those games. And quite frankly, for me, the Ravens are going to have to spit the bed a little bit, which, by the way, is possible. And it was a 10-10 game at the half against the Texans, and I think they had 23 passing yards at home,
Yep.
So they played a really sloppy second half. Their offense is still hit or miss a little bit, but their defense is really, really good.
Yeah, it's going to be something down there. I mean, you look at Jason Kelce and, him up there in the suite. I'm curious what you think their future looks like. Like, you're a media guy. You've been in this game for a long time. Like, everyone's assuming if Kelce retires or Jason retires, Travis retires, they continue with their podcast. They get right in the booth if they want to. They get right on a panel if they want to. Like, is that your anticipation that the Kelce brothers are just going to own NFL media for the next 20 years, or where do you stand on that?
I think Jason will, as soon as he officially announces, he'll get signed by somebody immediately. Travis, I think, wants to play at least 2 more years. And then, of course, if you listen to the Swifties, he's just going to go on the road with Taylor. So
Right.
I don't know if he has time. I don't know if he has time to do broadcast stuff. It's like Brady when he signed that deal with Fox. He still hasn't stepped into the booth, and I'm not sure he's ever going to. I think they want to use Brady, quite frankly, as a boost for advertisers more than and Greg Olson is amazing at the job. Like, he's really, really good. I'm not convinced Tom will ever actually call a game from a booth.
Well, we'll see. We got 3 games left. A little bit bittersweet, but it's going to be a fun ride the rest of the way. Thank you for doing this, Trey. We appreciate it.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Take care.
Trey Wingo, host of the Chasin podcast and the contributor with the 33rd team.
Brady doesn't step foot in the booth. Didn't they give him $350 million?
Yeah, but it hasn't kicked in until
He's going
actually
into
does
ownership, don't you think? Wouldn't he be in
He
ownership?
owns a piece of Vegas now. Like, it's a small chunk, but he owns a piece of it.
I guess it could be true. Maybe he's just a foot. You talk about that, that burning desire to win and the competitiveness of a freak. Maybe he's like, I want to be involved in a team, whether it be ownership, whatever he wants to do. And just calling the games is not competitive enough for me. Who knows?
Yeah, might be. You know what? When Luke was on earlier, I was going to bring this up. Would you think that Belichick would be a fit in Buffalo? Would they think of Gasson McDermott?
Dude,
I don't
why
think they
wouldn't
will.
you think of it, dude? You have to think of that. If you're playing for keeps and it's Super Bowl or bust when you've got that golden nugget in Allen, you have to at least contemplate it, Hayes. You're not serious if you're not contemplating it.
I hear you, but that's Pagula that would have to do it, and Belichick's going to ask for a lot more money than they're paying McDermott, and I think, like I've said all along, I think in Buffalo they're not used to winning it all, so they don't know how to react when they don't know how to will themselves into that mentality.
I know, but change that thinking. Bring in Bill Belichick, and you would be amazed at how many. Do you remember down at Scotiabank Arena when they brought in Mike Babcock and every member of MLSE was down there and they're just like this. Like they're like, this guy's the guy that gets in the playoffs. He's won Stanley Cups. He wins everything. Everyone was in awe. Ultimately, it fizzled out. But I think to just change everyone's approach, you got to look at it.
Listen, if it were me and my money, I'd do it.
Yes.
I would absolutely do it because you've got the weapons there. You've got what it takes, and Bill Belichick, I believe, would put them over the top. I'm just saying,
because what's the
I don't
worst
think they
thing
will.
what's the worst thing that can happen? You lose again?
Yeah, I
Change
guess-
it up, man.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, that is literally what's at stake here. You lose again, but I think their argument will be, we won a lot of games down the stretch. McDermott's great. We love him. He and the GM are in sync. If you fire him, you got to pay him plus Bill.
Dude, sometimes it's not fair, man. You're trying to get somebody with a better track record, and it's just overall better, perceived as being better.
Yeah. No, you put Bill Belichick in Buffalo, that would be the craziest story.
Dude, that would be the spiciest meatball of all time.
Ever.
We'd go do a show outside.
It would be amazing.
In Buffalo.
Because he'd be in the hoodie every single week. It's cold weather. It's outdoor. That's where Bill Belichick should be. He should be in New England,
Not
Cleveland,
Atlanta.
Buffalo. No. In a dome on turf? Like, you kidding me? I don't want to see Bill Belichick roaming the sidelines in a tank top.
Tight pull-up and a tuck.
Exactly. I don't want it. The ratings are coming in down in the States. Just massive numbers.
Told you, Swifty.
Yeah, but not even for that. I haven't even seen last night's game. I saw on Saturday the Packers-Niners game peaked at like 41 million, which is the highest Saturday night rating for anything on a Saturday night since like 1994.
I guess
or
they're
something
doing
like
Saturday
that.
nights now.
Yeah, well,
really.
I mean, exactly. I think it's the nature of those, those two teams and the brand. But NBC is saying that that Bucks Lions, again, Detroit and Tampa are not massive markets. These are not big, like high profile teams. And I guess that game in the second half in the final minutes peaked at 49.1 million people.
Wow.
That's in the U.S. alone. That's a divisional game with Baker Mayfield charging down the field for the Bucks. And 50 million people are watching.
That's insane.
Yeah. Like that's the NFL.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll come back with our best bets brought to you by FanDuel. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Over the number, Golden Knights, Devils. Neither team can keep the puck out of their net. I mean, their goaltending's been bad. Their defensive play's been
Dude,
bad.
is that Devils team ever going to flip the switch here?
Their injuries are killing them. Their
it's
goaltending,
mounting.
Lindy Ruff snapping. It's not good.
They were back to chanting "Fire Lindy" the other day
No.
too.
Not his problem. I mean,
I
I
didn't like that. I mean,
Yeah.
they're literally right on the cusp. They got 49 points. It's not like they've got 34 points or something. Like they're right there. But
yeah.
23, 18, and 3. So they're not, but they haven't turned the corner. Where they were unbelievable last year. They were first in the league for a while there. But they got to get their act together.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's disappointing. There's no denying that. They were expected to compete top spot in the East, maybe be a cup contending team. And that certainly has not been the case, but they've had really bad injuries, and their goaltending's been terrible. So over the number in the Devils Golden Knights game tonight, Canucks minus 1.5 at home against Chicago. No Bedard. The Blackhawks are a mess. I think the Canucks roll tonight, and I'm gonna lay the points with the Raptors at home against the Grizzlies as well. This is a tankathon game, though, right? Memphis, like Ja Morant's out for the year. They have a lot of injuries with Memphis. They are terrible. It's like the Raps are. If they want to finish bottom 6, they kind of got to lose tonight. That would go a long way, but that's not the mentality, and it's not going to be the approach. And I think the Raptors are going to reset. They lost pretty badly against New York on Saturday night. I think they recover tonight. I think they win, and they win big. That parlay paying plus 548. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and find thousands of ways to play. Please play responsibly. 18 plus, physically located in Ontario.
I'm not Woj, but did you see that little nugget I sent you, or is that?
Yeah, are we buying that Kyle Lowry
An
and
insider or what?
Kyle Lowry possibly being moved? I mean,
That's where you have to weigh, because going to Charlotte to end it is
no, he'll get waived. He'll get bought out and waived. Like that's the move in the NBA. Vets get sent somewhere they don't want to go late. As basically your contract, we got to get it off the books or whatever. You're throwing in a deal to make the money work, and then it's just understood. There's like if this happens, if Kyle gets traded to Charlotte, there's no way he's staying there. Like no chance. They will buy him out, and he will sign somewhere else. So I don't know where he'll go. I don't know what he's got left in the tank. We saw him last week. He was terrible. And I'm not saying that to jump on the guy. Like
the legs fall off and it gets ugly at the end, man.
Yeah, it's the end of the road. He signed a 3-year deal in Miami. He's still playing it through.
It was too long.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely. And he's. I love Kyle. He's an unbelievable player. Great career. We know what's coming. He's going to be a big part of the Raptors' future, history, etc. But it's the end of the road, I think, for him. So, we'll see.
Oof.
But
It's tough though, like that. You don't want to go. I don't know. There's no like graceful way to go out, is there? It's just sometimes if you want to play still.
The only graceful way, Noodles, is if you just beat everyone to it and you say, "Check, please. Don't even think about me sticking around
John
for 2
Kruk.
years."
yeah.
You hit a homer and you walk in your car and you go home.
Yeah. You go out on going out on top is really difficult to do. It's very tough.
Well, it's difficult because someone's willing to hand you a 3-year contract that you don't really deserve, and the money's outrageous. Who the hell's going to say no to that?
No, exactly.
Go ahead, I'll take it.
No, exactly. And they made it to an NBA final. and Kyle was kicking around down there. Kyle brought what he was supposed to bring early, but I think it was understood by the end of the deal. It was probably going to be a little bit too much. Yet they're still playing them. They've had injury issues down in Miami, and they're kind of a middle of the pack team in the East. I think they have higher hopes than that, higher aspirations, and we'll see what happens with Lowry. Like, Kyle's a big golfer too. Like, I think that he went down to play, obviously, in Miami, but I'll guarantee you he tees it at a very high level.
High level. He got a little taste for that in the Tampa bubble season.
Yes, he did. I would love to see how many rounds he put in during that season in Tampa. Like, if he's posting on, like Golf Canada's got the app, you post your rounds, you keep your handicap.
Yeah.
I can't imagine pro players are doing that because they don't want everyone to know. Or he's doing it under an alias. That's a big move. I have a couple buddies that don't put their real name in there. So
can't do it, man. Yeah. Can't do it. You're supposed to be in a meeting or at your office and you're on the tee sheet. You're screwed.
Exactly. That's why it's for work. They can't have their boss being like, oh, look at this guy. You played this morning? I thought you said you weren't available.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Oh, you shot 78. You wanted to post that one, huh? Full details and like analytics, like the amount of putts, everything.
Love it.
Anyway, so yeah, we'll see. Raps in action tonight. Best of luck to the Raptors. I think they win big tonight. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out today. We appreciate that as always. Everyone for tuning in today. Radio, TV, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at...
You and Alvin's brother, Chev, were not even close to competitive freaks, and that's why you went nowhere. 4 p.m.
We'll chat then.